Elders can keep themselves safe by keeping themselves educated. And that's a role that the police try to participate in. Other community groups are also active in education and will often consult with the police and have our officers attend to give talks about education. There's a great deal of education available on the internet for those that are using the internet and making themselves familiar with the internet. The Senior Center in Strathroy will frequently run programs to educate the seniors in Strathroy about trends not only generally going on in the area, but specific to Strathroy, what it is that's happening in Strathroy. And if we do find trends in Strathroy, our media relations officer will frequently publish those both on the radio and in the local newspaper.
So we really want to try and encourage people to try and maintain as active as possible and to reduce the likelihood that they may become more isolated from those people that care most about them.
There's vibrant seniors community centers all around this province that are very, very active. And some just play cards together, some, get buses and go on outings. They are involved in all sorts of things, but they also have a welcome wagon aspect to it. They give people ideas of what is in the community. So we really suggest that seniors hook into those kinds of networks.
It's also important for people to make sure that they clearly document and write down their wishes and their intentions. Make sure that you have had conversations and that people are aware of what it is you want to have happen with your finances, your health care, your property, your estate, all of those types of things. Because if people are aware of what you would like to see happen, they're less likely to allow somebody to come in and make choices on your behalf that maybe wouldn't necessarily match with what you would really like to have happen. Maintain connections with friends, loved ones, neighbors. It's important that people know where you are and what's happening to you and around you, so that way if something changes or if something's just not right, those friends are aware of what's happening and can be that support to you. Another good suggestion that the police will often recommend to help reduce the likelihood that you may be targeted by a financial or a banking fraud would be to have bills automatically deducted from your account and have your checks directly deposited into your account, thus reducing the likelihood that somebody might intercept your banking information and make false transactions in your name or from your account. It's also a really good strategy to make sure that you're seeking the appropriate professional supports and services when you're making any legal binding documents, including wills, power of attorney, power of healthcare, any of those types of things. Because if it's clearly documented and reviewed by a professional, there's less likelihood that there could be something in there that might not necessarily be in your best interest or reflect what you would really want to have happen in the event that you weren't able to communicate on your own behalf.
There's two kinds of powers of attorney. There's power of attorney for property and power of attorney for personal care. And we use them to assist elders in planning for the future, though I think everybody should have these documents, not just seniors. But they're a way of protecting them against financial or physical or other kinds of abuse because they get to decide who's going to look after them. They get to tell the person who's going to be looking after them what kinds of decisions they get to make. They can continue to participate in the decision making. And when they're incapable and they need these decisions made for them, if they have to go to the statute, it may not be the appropriate person. So they get to choose. They get to choose who's going to look after their bank accounts and pay their bills, sell their property. For personal care, it's decisions around housing, medical decisions, hygiene, safety. So you want to know that the person is looking out for you. Unfortunately, elders are the same as the rest of us. There's criminals around, and they take things that they shouldn't take. And this is a protection for that, so that if you have a nephew that shows up and borrows your green card all the time and takes $200, this way they can have the green card canceled, and he can't do that anymore. The attorney can control it. If the attorney wants to assist the elder, I try and make sure they meet regularly so that the conversation continues. The more that we talk about their finances, their living situation, the choices that have to be made when they're not incapable, the more we talk about it publicly, I think the safer they are. And these documents just assist a little bit. They start the conversation with family and friends, saying, I'm planning for the future when I may not be able to look after myself. I don't want to be taken advantage of. And this is an instrument that helps them to do that. Misusing power of attorney, unfortunately, is quite common. Most common is that the people start acting as if the attorney starts acting as if it's in fact their money, instead of that they're looking after someone else and that they're paying someone else's bills or mortgage or looking after their investments. So that's the first thing that happens. They end up siphoning off money into their own lives and buying things because they can. So that's the major thing, is they spend the money on themselves rather than on the person who they should be spending it on. So that, buying the new boat, paying off the loan, that kind of stuff. The other thing that often they do is they loan money to other people from the bank account of the person, and that's really difficult because the third party may not know that grandma didn't agree to the money. So that's also another way. So those are the obvious financial ones. The other one is fraud. They write checks that because they have the right to borrow money, they borrow money and write checks that there is no money because there's no money coming in. So they get the senior into debt. And it's heartbreaking because many of my clients have worked their whole lives, and then suddenly they're a senior and they have no money because it's all been taken from them, and in fact they have a debt when they'd been debt-free for many years, and that's particularly heartbreaking. I recommend they go to a lawyer. Absolutely, I do. It's not an expensive proposition. Many legal clinics, my legal clinic does it, many others do as well. And I absolutely recommend that they need to know what it is that they're doing, and they need to sit down and think about it. The person that they have to choose has to be trustworthy, and they have to trust them, and that's very difficult. I try to advise them not to use the document as a way to make peace in the family, because then it won't work for them. It may keep the siblings happy because they're both named, but they don't speak to each other, they fight, they disagree, so the elder, in fact, is not being served by the document. So I try and make sure that they understand that this is to protect them. It's not to keep the family happy. Public Guardian and Trustee has information pamphlets. Community Legal Education Ontario, which is a community legal clinic that produces legal literature, they have pamphlets and brochures on public powers of attorney as well. So there's lots of good material out there. A number of accountants and banks also put out articles pretty regularly about powers of attorney. So in fact, there's quite a bit of public education out there that's easy to get at.
We don't have adult protection legislation in Ontario, so elder abuse in itself is not considered against the law. There are elements of elder abuse that are covered under the criminal code. And effective of July of this last year, 2010, the Long-Term Care Act came into place. It's the first time across the board that long-term care homes have had legislation that identifies abuse and identifies the requirements for reporting and how to act. According to the legislation, there's really no such thing as an innocent bystander. If you suspect or witness abuse, it is your obligation to report that to the administrator or the Ministry of Health. And that's an obligation of every staff member, volunteer, or visitor that comes into a long-term care home. There is an action line through the ministry, and there's different manners of reporting through the homes, but it's everyone's obligation. Also within the legislation, it also does cover whistleblower protection. So the home cannot retaliate against any staff member or resident that does make a report or allegation of abuse.
If you know or suspect that an elder is being abused or mistreated, it's important that you make sure that you report it to somebody, that you connect with that senior, because that individual may have things happening in their home, in their life, that otherwise they're not comfortable talking to you about. So it's important to engage them in a conversation. Asking questions such as, is everything okay? Is there anything I can do? Letting them know and sharing concern for them is really going to be helpful in building that relationship and helping them to understand that you're there in their best interest, that you're not there necessarily trying to pry, but just that you're really caring for them and that you're seeing something is happening and you're worried about their well-being and their health. When talking with an individual that you suspect is being abused or mistreated, it is important for a person to feel that they are being believed, that they are not being judged, and that the listener is not going to deny or dismiss what's being told to them. The listener should also understand that change is difficult and that it may take time for that person to make the changes necessary. It's important for a person to seek out the supports that would be helpful for them to deal with whatever situation they're facing. There's lots of resources available throughout the community, so if we can be encouraging and supportive of them to access and to go alongside them and advocate with them, then they're hopefully going to be more inclined to access those supports when needed.